Most complex decisions in the context of business management are based on intuition and judgment informed by experience. Despite providing a structured approach, rational decision-making models are not always used, and decisions are regularly made using judgment based on experience. Time constraints, complexity, and a lack of information combine to force people to make unstructured decisions. In some instances, the solution is obvious and a number of options can be selected to provide an adequate decision. However, to ensure the survival of organisations in the current economic climate, a combination of rational, creative, and innovative decisions are required. Taking shortcuts increases the possibility for errors of judgment to occur. When making decisions, it's important for people to keep the strategic goals of the organisation in mind. This video outlines some of the decisions facing those managing people and tasks to give an understanding of the scope of the role. We look at whether individuals or groups produce the best decisions and consider some of the problems experienced by groups. We'll briefly introduce 4 decision-making styles, explaining the effects and outcomes of each style. And we'll look at behavioural statements associated with competence in decision-making. And you're encouraged to assess your rating of your competences using these statements. You'll recall from an earlier session that the rational decision-making model involves 6 steps. 1. We define the problem. A clear understanding of the problem and the issues surrounding it is essential if the correct solutions are to be identified. 2. We identify the decision criteria, so we list the different standards that must be considered when making the decision. 3. Weigh up the criteria, so rank and score the required standards according to importance. 4. Identify possible alternatives, so list all the options that could resolve the problem. 5. Rate each alternative on each criterion. And finally, select the best alternative, so the decision is based on the alternative with the highest total score. Now, in rational decision making, that sequence needs to be followed, otherwise the solution will not have the desired effect. So it's easy to see why the rational decision making model would be suitable for straightforward decisions where few alternative options exist. But there can be practical difficulties in applying it. Like most problems can be complex and ambiguous, therefore the real problem is not always obvious. In some instances, the solution isn't obvious. There's a wide range of options which might produce an identical solution. People are limited in their ability to identify all the relevant criteria and alternatives, so personal biases and preferences can often interfere with the rational process. Due to the complexity of a lot of problems, it can be difficult to rank criteria and alternatives correctly. So rationality depends on our ability to gather all the relevant information, to weigh and rank the relevant criteria before making decisions. However, in reality, people allow irrelevant information, biases, or emotions to influence their judgments. So while ideally decisions need to be approached on a rational basis, sometimes there is a need for more creative thinking and innovative solutions. These practical difficulties can force us to take shortcuts in the decision-making process, and we base our decisions on experience, intuition, or impulse. Now, these approaches can lead to errors of judgment in that people often don't think strategically, therefore they don't take into account the high-level goals of the organisation. Most people have an overrated opinion of their own abilities and performance, and this can lead to misplaced overconfidence that results in poor analysis of problems. We can rely too heavily on experience, which is of little value when innovation and creativity is what's actually required. And sometimes we don't learn from the past, so we have an inaccurate assessment of our role in previous experiences. So how do we reduce these errors? Well, we can become familiar with the high-level goals of our organisation, and this helps us to reduce the number of options when making decisions. And we need to avoid overconfidence to ensure that we look for information that challenges our beliefs and assumptions. Another shortcut that can be taken is what's called bounded rationality. And this is where a person commences the rational decision-making process. However, the list of criteria is usually limited to the most obvious options. So the criteria are not ranked and a limited number of alternatives are considered. The decision maker will then consider the alternative in sequence until the first alternative that provides a good enough solution is found, and then the process stops. And what happens is the solutions that are closest to the existing problem are usually chosen by this method, which means that new and innovative solutions are rarely, if ever, considered. Which leads us to intuitive decision making, or gut instinct as it's commonly known. Now, this can be a powerful force if used in conjunction with rational decision making. It's probably more acceptable when used by people who have significant experience and expertise in a particular area. But sometimes people are forced to rely on intuition when there's high levels of uncertainty or there's little precedence to draw from. Sometimes facts are limited or time constraints are a significant challenge. But in reality, people rarely confess their reliance on intuitive decision making, unless, of course, the outcome is hugely successful. Decisions arising from managing people and tasks require a thorough assessment of the short and long-term effects of decisions, recognising the political and ethical implications and being conscious of people affected by the decisions made. Now, typically these decisions involve strategy, the approach or direction that the organisation is trying to take to maximise profit or remain competitive in a competitive market, resources, the number of resources required and how they're distributed through the organisation, at what level tasks should be assigned, and what level of knowledge, skills and attributes are required to accomplish them, performance and how will it be monitored, assessed and rewarded, decisions about how decisions will be made. Will they be made by management and handed down for compliance, or will the organisation use a consultative approach? Communication, how will this be handled? Will it be closed or will it be two-way open communication, encouraging feedback, innovation and creativity? Decisions around training and development. What, if any, training and development will be provided? How will people be recruited? Will they be recruited with the required knowledge, skills and attributes? Will we have a coaching and mentoring service and how will this be provided? What's the succession planning policy, etc.? Now, as part of the job of managing people and tasks, the question of individual versus group decisions is an interesting one. Lone individuals, if given the latitude to generate as many solutions as possible, can in fact produce more options than groups. Now, having said that, research is inconclusive on whether decisions taken by individuals or groups are superior, but groups can make effective decisions if they are well chaired. Participants are committed to finding a solution, has clear goals, they're supported by management, and they have expert advice available if required. Now, there are also problems with group decision making, which include group polarisation, groupthink, and ignoring minority views. Now, we have different approaches in terms of our decision-making styles, and this particular model is based on two different dimensions: the way a person thinks and their tolerance for ambiguity or multiple meanings. The way a person thinks can range from logical and rational to intuitive and creative, and tolerance for ambiguity ranges from a need to have structured information to an ability to process multiple thoughts simultaneously. And when we combine these two dimensions, that gives us four decision-making styles: directive, analytic, conceptual, and behavioural. People that have a predominant directive style have a low tolerance for ambiguity and prefer rationality. Typically, they're efficient and logical, however, their decisions are quick and can only be applied in the short term as they fail to gather all the information required and consider few alternatives. The analytic decision makers tend to combine a high tolerance for ambiguity with a need for rationality. These individuals seek out more information and consider more alternatives. They're careful decision makers and have an ability to cope with new and unexpected problems. Individuals favouring the conceptual style have a high tolerance for ambiguity and a tendency to be intuitive. They source data from multiple sources and consider many alternatives. They have a strategic focus and can produce creative solutions to problems. Individuals with a behavioural preference have a low tolerance for ambiguity combined with intuitive tendencies. Their focus is on the concerns of their subordinates, sometimes at the expense of the rationale of the problem. Their decisions are short-term ones as they concentrate on avoiding conflict and seeking acceptance. While individuals will have a predominant decision-making style based on one of the four, effective managers vary their style to suit the particular circumstances. These behavioural statements are associated with competence in decision-making. The ePortfolio activity should enable you to familiarise yourself with these and test your own competence against them. So draw from your life and professional experience to date and insert examples of the behavioural statement in your ePortfolio. Then consider opportunities that you feel you could avail of to improve your ratings or gain valuable experience as appropriate.